For today's tutorial, I'll be working on this really beautiful little cupboard, which I picked up on Marketplace for just £40. It needs some love, guys, but I don't know what to do with it. I have to be honest, I've had a little bit of creative block. I think the reason I've had creative block is because it's got great bones, and sometimes a piece of furniture that's got great shape doesn't require an awful lot to it other than one flat coat of paint and off it goes. And I think that is what I've been struggling with. So what I've decided to do is go with a very subtle sort of patina finish, a bit of distressing, and create layers of patina. So as you look away from the piece, it almost looks like one color, but when you get into the piece, that you'll see lots of different things happening over the surface. And the inspiration I'm taking from this is kind of a robin's egg or a duck egg, that sort of lovely egg-like quality to the surface with a little bit of distressing here and there. So wish me luck. It will be a tutorial that will evolve as I go through it. I have not mapped out how we're going to get from A to B, but you're going to join me on that journey, hopefully, and you can see how I create that subtle patina of a robin's egg. First up, a little bit of prep work. I had to fill down the side of one of the panels of the cupboard doors. There was a nasty crack that went all the way down one side. So I've taken my 2-pack filler and filled it in and ready for a good old sand. So that's all of my prep work that I'm going to do on this piece. All that I had to really do was fill this rather large crack down the sides, which I'm really happy with how that's turned out. Now, as you all have seen, I am not sanding the whole piece. A lot of people ask me the question, where's your prep work? Well, chalk paint doesn't need prep work, not unless it's a super shiny surface like melamine or one of those oily plastics. And this has got a sheen to it, has got a little bit of a varnish sheen to it, which we're going to use to our advantage when it comes to wet distressing. This will allow me to remove certain parts of paint in the distressing technique. And of course, when the paint cures, it will harden and be super grippy. So don't worry about that, guys. If you are not au fait with Annie Sloan chalk paint, it's fine. Now, the canvas coat, my first coat that I'm going to go in with, I've mixed up a colour. It's here. It's pure, mixed with a touch of country grey. I wanted an off-whitey colour, sort of a natural off-white. And I'm gonna do something really different now that I've never done before, so you're gonna learn with me. I'm gonna use a sponge to apply it, to add a bit of texture. Now, lots of people use a brush for texture, stippling, and it's really nice. You get those fine little bits of texture. My thoughts why I would apply with a sponge is when it does come to wet distressing, it tends to be the thinner paint that comes away. So by using a sponge, I'm hoping for thicker and thinner. I'm going to leave some areas where I want to distress on the edges. So I'm not going to paint the whole thing solid, but it's just that under layer of paint, and then we'll go over with our other shade. So let's see how this works. So that's my canvas coat applied with my sponge. Now the sponge that I've used is a little bit like a natural seawool sponge, but it's man-made, lots of large holes. It's left a really wonderful patina, almost like eggshell, and that's what we're going for. I'm really happy with this base coat. The one thing that I do want to talk about, the elephant in the room, can you spot it? Here, I have some bleed through. So let's take a moment to talk about bleed through. If you don't know what that is, it is usually the tannelings in the wood coming to the surface. The chalk paint is kind of sucking those tannelings to the surface. And notice, guys, it's in the area that I sanded. So another reason why not to sand your piece of furniture when you're using chalk paint, because it's in exactly the same area that I rubbed away. Now, I would say this is kind of like mango wood, and those pieces of furniture generally give you this. I've also got a little bit here. So options with bleed through. What could you do at this point with your canvas coat? You can see where the issues are. You can go in with Zinsser, bin Zinsser 123 or a shellac, cover it over, and then proceed with your next layer of paint. I'm not going to do that. I quite like these. You know what I call them? The happy accidents. I quite like where this is. Just think, the handle's going there, and the person is going to pull the handle. It's going to get dirty there. It's almost like natural distressing for me. When you're working with a piece of furniture with lots of distressing, chippy patina, it can look amazing. If you're going for a flat finish, it can be a nightmare. Of course it can, but I'm not going to worry about it. If it upsets me on the next layer of paint, then maybe I'll go over it, but let's leave it. Let's see what happens to the bleed through and how well it'll look on the end piece. So that's my first coat of duck egg applied. As you can see, there's 1 or 2 white areas poking out. This is because I did a really thin coat in an any which way with the brush. And I'm going to apply another coat, but I am going to add another colour at this stage. Now, the reason that I'm adding another colour is that I see this duck egg blue, although it is a green blue, I see it as quite blue predominantly. I want to add a touch more green. I feel like this piece needs to be a bit more green. You know I like green, guys. So I'm adding a touch of olive, which mixed with the duck egg, we should end up with sort of a chateau grey colour. I'm not going to take everything away. I'm going to do some detailed areas, a bit more green at the bottom, round the edges. I'm just going to do a smoky blend, mixing the two together as I apply this next coat. And then we'll move on to the colour wash. Again, I want to add a touch more green cream sort of tones, yellowy, greeny cream colours. So I'm thinking that I might go with Versailles. I haven't decided yet. We'll get this coat on and see how it looks at the end of that. So let's crack on. I forgot to mention in the video footage the bleed through. It has vanished under that first layer of duck egg, so there was no need to worry about the bleed through. But like I said, if you do have issues with bleed through, you can fix it with the shellac primers that go over the top. So here we have it, guys. This layer of paint is just about dried and I'm really happy with this colour combination. The duck egg and olive mix on the surface just works so well. So much so, I've decided not to go with a Versailles colour wash. I think it might just get too complicated with the colour tone. So we're going to stick with the olive. I've pre-mixed my colour wash. This time I've gone with a 60% water to 40% paint. Here it is. You've all seen me mix a colour wash before. So I'm using 2 brushes, this big brush to apply to the largest areas of the piece and a smaller brush for the detailed areas. Now when I do a colour wash and wet distress, I like to cover the whole piece with the colour wash and allow it to sit and then start using a damp rag, which I have a bucket of water here with a cotton cloth in there, which I'll wring out and scrunch up and slowly start offloading some of the pigment from the colour wash, which will reveal the colours that sit underneath. So we may see a little bit more of the duck egg coming through again, which I'll concentrate on removing larger areas in the flat areas and allowing the colour wash to sit in the crevices. I'm hoping that we'll come back to some of the sponged white colour that we put underneath, and of course there will be lots of the wood. So I thought it would be a good time to interject with the colour washing and ragging, the offloading of the colour wash, which is the olive. And I will scan over the piece so you can see how this looks right now. All of the paint is kind of stayed in situ, which is good. I'm quite happy with that. But what is happening now, all of this moisture in the piece is eating through those other layers right back down to the wood. So it's making the paint very unstable. And I'm going to carry on offloading some more of the colour wash to reveal some of the duck egg with a clean, dry cloth. So I'm going to do the same motion, pouncing and twisting. What I would say, guys, is do not allow this to dry out because it will dry out pretty quick, and that's why I'm talking quick. So it will dry out pretty quick, and if it is drying out quick, go over with your atomizer. You do need this to be quite wet. For the distressing marks, what I'm going to do with that is the same thing, damp rag. I'm going to push my finger into certain areas and kind of twist, and it will come off in a natural way. I should think it'll come off in a better way because of that first layer of sponging, because the paint's in thick and thin layers, if that makes sense. So I'm going to crack on before this gets too dry and start revealing some of those other colours from underneath. So here we have it. I'm just waiting for this layer to dry before I move on with another patina technique over the top of this. Now, this project is all about the subtlety of different layers of patina. We've got all sorts from blending and then ragging off the colour wash. We've got the underlayers of the sponging coming through, and now I want to add a few more layers to really create that duck eggy kind of feel, or robin's egg, bird's egg, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to add some speckles to the whole piece now. This will allow your eyes to travel all over the place. It will really soften everything off, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. I'm going to do 3 layers of speckles now. 2 of the layers I'm going to do through this plant spray. Now, you want to be really mixing at least 50% water, maybe even a little bit more. You must trial this on a piece of card somewhere out of the way of your piece. And if you can, tilt your piece of furniture on its side, just to not completely on its back, on a 45-degree angle. You don't want your paint to trickle down. You can fix that, of course, but it is much better that these speckles kind of stay in position. One thing that I would say is, once you've mixed up your solution, do it in a jug, mix up 50-50, and pour it into the chamber. Then take some clear water and pump it through the spray. pop the spray bottle back together, take your piece of card, pump it until we get paint through. This will help your paint travel up before you start working with your spray bottle, if that makes sense. We're going to do 2 layers. So the first layer, I'm going to go in with probably a Paris grey and old white mix. So they will be slightly paler. They will sit over sort of the darker areas. We are going to do this quite heavily over the whole piece. Once they've dried, we're going to go back in, clean this out, go back in with another layer, which I'm going to mix up some French linen and some Enfleur just to pep up the darkness, and do the same again. Not as many on the second pass. And the final layer, I'm going to mix up again, not French linen, I'm going to mix up Enfleur with a little tiny bit of graphite just to deepen the darkness of the brown. And we're going to use this. This is one of my favourite brushes. Look at it. It's terrible, rusty. Now, this is the cheapest brush that I found at the hardware store. And the bristles were longer and I cut them in half, or a little bit less than half. A lot of people think fly speck with a toothbrush is much better. I don't believe that. The bristles are too plasticky and they bend too much. So if you can get an old bristle brush, can you see it's got lovely flex? It will carry those speckles much better to the surface of the piece. This layer I will mix up slightly different. It's going to be less water in a little pot, less water to the paint, and then go for it. They should stick quite nicely. So that's enough of talking. Let's let this dry, and whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to start mixing that first layer of Paris grey and old white mix, and then we can start speckling the whole piece. Okay, as you probably would have just seen, I had to go back and fix some areas of this. This spray is far too strong, but I'm going to stick with it because I've done the front. I am going to go with it. I do think actually kitchen cleaning product spray bottles are much better. How I saved it. I'm going to show you how I saved it. My fateful sponge, the holy sponge. So I'm going to do the top surface. This is much harder because I've got to go from above and show you what I actually did in that sped up piece of footage. So all I'm doing is a spritz of my spray at some distance. There you go. We're getting big speckles and little speckles here, which is quite good. The big ones we'll deal with in a moment. So that's my speckles on. You see areas like here, not so good. I've also managed to get the front. Again, let me sort the front out. It is difficult when you're moving the furniture around. So, atomizer. I'm just going to mist in, allow them to sit and mist in a little bit of moisture. And then anywhere that's too big, we're just going to offload them with the sponge. The sponge will automatically soften those larger speckles. So I'm moving the sponge around. We want some of them to bed in. That's an area which is quite strong, so we're just going to atomise that and sponge them down. So it's a bit like the ragging that we did earlier. We're offloading some of the paint with the sponge. It's picking back the pigment back up. Just take away anywhere that you're not keen and leave what you do like. I may change my spray bottle for the next pass. I'm going to keep on going though because I think this is looking great. Let me take just going to remove some of that area. It's too light for me. That's just the cloth. And again, back in with the sponge. Lovely. So there is fixes to anything that you're doing. I suppose it's just having the tools on hand. It's really looking egg-like now. Okay, so I have two flaws in my plan. I haven't got a spray bottle in the house that hasn't got its contents still. I don't want to empty one. Mr. M probably will tell me off if I do that. So I'm going to resort to the other method right now, and that is my soupy mixture, 20% water with my paint. The other flaw in my plan is that I had no French linen. I didn't notice that I didn't have French linen, so I've gone with cocoa. Very similar in shade. It works really well with duck egg. So I'm going to go back in with my brush. I'm going to take the long way around this. I initially wanted to do this through the spray bottle, which you can do. The sponge is awesome to take any flaws away. I think you saw that. So I'm going to take my time just going over the piece in certain areas with my cocoa, and then we'll move forward into the darker colour. Well, I'm nearing the end of this tutorial and I'm really happy with the way that this project has turned out. These subtle changes of patina are absolutely gorgeous and I cannot wait to apply my clear wax, which is the final thing to do to the whole piece. I'm not going to buff this in, I'm just going to apply a coat and then remove it with a cloth and just leave it kind of matte, almost like an eggshell. The other thing is I'm going to use this handle. This came off another piece of furniture. I think the colour works far better than the original and the shape. The other thing is I need to talk about my little friend that's made 2 appearances, and that's not the cat, that's not Lily, the sponge. Absolutely my friend throughout this tutorial, especially when it came to bedding in all of those speckles. It really works wonderful. Grab a sponge, guys. The other thing that I'd like to say before I go away from this tutorial and you get to see the end result shots, I'd like to say all of you new subscribers that have just jumped into my channel, welcome. Please hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell for future projects. And please take away whatever you wish from these tutorials. I do them to create ideas in your minds, plant seeds. So you may not do this tutorial as is. You may take the wet distress part of the technique, you may take the fly speck part of the technique, use it to your advantage on your projects. Anyway, that's me done. Enjoy the end shots. Thank you for joining me once again. I will catch you all on the next one.